Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Om. Good. Welcome back. We continue our study of the Mahabharata today with a really important topic, Svadharma. How is it that we should determine what we should and should not do with our lives? And that's brought out in a very powerful way. Remember the story, this Kaushika, this Brahmana with some ego problems, is going to Mithila to meet who he thinks is a very pious hunter. The word Vyadha is used. The most common meaning for Vyadha is hunter. So this Brahmana, Kaushika, is going to Mithila to meet this Vyadha, this very pious hunter, Kshatriya, and he discovers the person he's looking for, he discovers in a butcher shop, because another meaning of Vyadha is butcher. A butcher who is of the Shudra caste. So he thinks he's going to see this Kshatriya hunter. He ends up meeting the Shudra butcher, and he's really upset. Really upset. In fact, so upset, he tells the butcher, this work isn't fitting for you. And this is where our discussion begins. By the way, this idea, just a quick comment before we plunge back in here. This idea of meeting holy people, we all have these fictitious ideas of who we're going to meet. I told this anecdote years ago. Most of you probably haven't heard it. When I was young, I was in Rishikesh, and I was going up into the foothills outside of Rishikesh to meet one Mauni Baba. He had kept silent for 10 years. And I was really anxious to meet this great saint. So I spent most of about half a day. Yeah, you have to go by foot, going up this hillside outside of Rishikesh. Finally, I get up to his cave. He lives in a cave. And I come to his cave, we take off our chappals, we have some fruits and flowers we're going to offer him, and we start approaching. The first thing I notice is he is reading a newspaper. Somehow that wasn't exactly what I expected to find. And the second thing I saw, I have to demonstrate to you. So he is reading his newspaper. The second thing I saw is this. Anyway, I learned a lesson. I learned a lesson about not having expectations. So, our Brahmana, named Kaushika, had expectations for who he was going to meet. He was told, you will meet the greatest teacher of Dharma. And he presumed it would be a great hunter. He found out it's this butcher, this Vyadha, and he's really upset. He criticized the Vyadha in the end of the last class. He said, this work isn't befitting for you. And the Vyadha replied, he said, hey, this is our family tradition. My father was a butcher. His father was a butcher. For generations we've been butchers. And then he proceeds, we saw this at the end of the last class. He says, Dhatra vihita purvam karma. He says, this is this karma that I'm doing has been vihita, is vihitam, has been established by whom? Dhatra. By the Vidhata, by Ishvara. According to his karma, he was determined to be born into this family. There's actually a story. Actually, I'll wait on the story. There's a story we'll come to later that explains in more detail why he was born to that story. We'll skip it for right now. We'll see it later. So he says, this is my karma. This was ordained by Ishvara long ago according to my own karma, my own prarabdha karma, and palayami aham. I carry out my karma. This is what my karma led me to do. I carry it out. And he says in the last half, kritam karma, the work I am doing, anveti kartaram, is in keeping with Ishvara's order, to use Puja Swami Dayananda's beautiful expression. He said, according to Ishvara's order, according to the natural unfoldment of karma in life. Remember, we understand Ishvara as karma phaladata, as the giver of the fruits of action. So in this way, Ishvara gives each and every one of us the fruits of the actions we ourselves have committed in past lives. And this Vyadha, this butcher, understands this perfectly well. And he explains to the Brahmana, this is my karma. By doing my work, by doing my duty, I am conforming to Ishvara's order. Now, we have a lot more to talk about. Just to give you a challenging perspective, suppose, let's use a modern example. A young boy is born in Palestine. His father has been killed through the conflict going on between the Jews and the Palestinians. His father has been killed. His brother has been killed. His other brother is out there committing acts of terrorism. My question is, this boy is growing up in this family, like the Vyadha grew up in a family of butchers. This boy is growing up in a family of terrorists. Happens. In Palestine, this is surprisingly common. It's a huge problem. This boy, just as the Vyadha grew up in a family of butchers, this boy, based on his karma, is growing up in a family of terrorists. So what will you say? Will you say it is his Svadharma to fight against the Jews? To fight against Israel? You see how complicated this is. It's a really complex issue. We're just beginning. So we have this whole 2 chapters that we're studying all about Svadharma. So with this challenging introduction, we'll pick up the thread. The first of Vyadha says that I am fulfilling my responsibility according to my prarabdha karma as ordained by Ishvara. Hard to argue with that, and he further explains. Ye chaiva mam prashamsanti, ye chaiva mam prashamsanti, ye cha nindanti manavaha, ye cha nindanti man, sarvan suparinitena, sarvan suparini, karmana toshayam yaham, karmana toshayam. So he says, there are those who mam prashamsanti. There are those who praise me. Is a butcher. Who would praise a butcher? Someone who likes to eat. To eat meat. So he is praised by those. I mentioned before, you do know that in ancient times, meat eating was not uncommon. In fact, prior to 2,500 years ago, meat eating was common. Starting 2,500 years ago, there was a general trend away from meat eating. We explained before in a prior class that Hinduism, Puja Swami Dayananda's words, he said, Hinduism is not a diet plan. Well said. So remember, the value, it is not that meat is unclean. If you're born in a Muslim or Jewish family, pigs are unclean. You can't eat them. Why? They're unclean. But that is so unlike the Hindu perspective. In fact, from the Hindu perspectives, pigs are Ishvara. As much as cows. Don't think only cows are sacred. Every living thing is sacred. So in the Hindu tradition, it is not that animals are somehow impure or unclean. Everything is sacred. Then why the emphasis on vegetarianism? I think you can all answer that question. Ahimsa. In a word, ahimsa. We can live without eating animals. To live without eating animals means we cause less harm. We'll come back to that. So he says here, Yecha eva mam prashamsanti. There are those people who praise me, those who eat meat. Yecha, and there are others, nindanti manavaha. There are other manavaha, other people who nindanti, who curse me. Who are those? The pious Orthodox Brahmanas who would never eat meat, they curse him. So he is praised by some, he is cursed by some. Now notice in life, most people will act in such a way where we avoid getting cursed and we do things which will make people praise us. Doesn't public opinion shape people's behavior to a great extent? Absolutely. So the question is, how much has public opinion shaped the Vyadha's behavior? Some people curse him, some people praise him, and he says what he does is toshayami aham. In the last line, he says, my job is to please them. To please whom? Sarvan, to please them all. To please them all how? Karmana, with my work. My job is to please them all, whether they curse me or praise me. My job is to please them all, karmana, with my work, suparinitena, with my work which is performed with care, dedication, and devotion. This is karma yoga. Look at this. Generally, what we do in life is driven mostly by raga and dvesha. So if people will praise you for doing something, you're more likely to do it. If people will criticize you for doing something, you're less likely to do it. This is raga dvesha. You like people to praise you, you don't like people to criticize you, and that can very much mold your behavior. But that's not the way to follow dharma. Our chapter is about Svadharma. Doing what you like and avoiding what you don't like is not Svadharma. It's conventional worldly life. But what our Vyadha does is, instead of being swayed by what other people think, he goes on. Even though there are a lot of people who criticize him for being a butcher, he goes on being a butcher. Why? Toshayami aham. He said, I should please everyone. But he doesn't please them by refraining. Those who criticize him, he says he's going to please them. How does he please those who criticize him? He says, karmana, by my actions, suparinita, by my actions which are well done, properly done with devotion, by his commitment to Svadharma. Those pious brahmanas who are disgusted by his work of chopping up animals, those same pious brahmanas understand this fellow is doing his Svadharma. And therefore, by doing his Svadharma, by doing his butchery work to support himself and his family, he fulfills his Svadharma and thereby pleases even those Orthodox Brahmanas who criticize him for chopping up animals. Toshiyami aham. He says, I please everyone. How? By fulfilling my duty. This is one of the principles of karma yoga. Karma yoga is a huge and complicated topic. A third of the Bhagavad Gita is devoted to it. Here's one reference to karma yoga. One of the basic principles of karma yoga is do what is right, whether you want to or not. A very simple way of putting it. Do what is right. Follow dharma, whether you want to or not, in spite of your raga and dvesha. So instead of having your behavior driven by your raga and dvesha, what should you do? Follow dharma. Do the right thing whether you want to or not. What is our Vyadha doing? He might prefer doing another kind of work. Probably would, wouldn't you? If you had to do this every day, you also would prefer doing another kind of work. He does it. Why? It is his Svadharma. It is the way according to his karma, as dispensed by Ishvara. It is the way that he is supporting himself and his family. Now, having discussed Svadharma briefly, now he's going to talk about ahimsa. Because oftentimes we define dharma in terms of ahimsa. In fact, look at the first line. Have you heard that before? Ahimsa paramo dharmaha. Ahimsa, non-injury, is the paramaha, the ultimate principle of dharma. This is quoted very often. In fact, this line comes in at least 4 places in the Mahabharata. This is not the only place it comes. It comes in at least, I looked it up once, I don't remember now. In at least 4 places this expression comes. It comes in many other scriptures as well. So now how do we reconcile his work of chopping up animals and the principle of ahimsa, which is also associated with dharma? Let's see what he has to say. Ahimsa paramo dharma, ahimsa paramo dharma, sacha satye pratishtitaha, sacha satye kritva pratishtham tu, satye kritva pratishtham, pravartante pravrittayaha, pravartante pravrit. So this statement, ahimsa paramo dharma, he says that's true. He admits it. He says so right here. He says ahimsa is the ultimate principle of dharma, but now he takes it a step further. He says sahacha, that ahimsa is satye pratishtitaha. That practice of ahimsa, the principle of ahimsa, is pratishtita, established in, based upon what? Satya. Satye, on satya. It's based on satya. Now, be careful of the word satya here. We're not talking about speaking truth. We're talking about fundamental principles of dharma. And fundamental principle of dharma, this word satya refers to, the way to explain it is to give you a common synonym for satyas. In this context, satya doesn't mean speaking truth. It does mean truth in a broader sense. The truth of the world, the truth of life, what Puja Swamiji called Ishvara's order. So satya here means Ishvara's order. The other word in Sanskrit that has exactly the same meaning is rita. Have you heard this? Satyam vadishyami, ritam vadishyami. There they come. Satyam vadishyami, I will tell truth. Ritam vadishyami, I will tell truth. Those words are synonyms. There's a slight difference, but mostly they're synonyms. Synonym, satyam and ritam. But the implied meaning of rita is a little different. Some of you know the word ritu to mean season. Seasons are that which are natural, that which continue to unfold in an orderly manner. That's the meaning of rita. that which unfolds in an orderly manner. Orderly manner is Puja Swamiji's expression, Ishvara's order, Ishvara's cosmic order. The word Satya here has that sense. The order of the universe, the natural flow of the universe. That which is the underlying structure of the universe. Or we could even go so far as to call it, as Puja Swamiji says, Ishvara's order, Ishvara's will, Ishvara's intent. So now with that in mind, what is Vyadha saying here? He is saying that ahimsa indeed is the highest principle of Dharma, but he says that ahimsa is based on an even more fundamental principle. What is that fundamental principle? Satyam, otherwise called Ritam, otherwise called Ishvara's order. Ishvara's order is what? We are born with karma. Ishvara is the dispenser of that karma. And according to our karma, it affects certain aspects of our lives. According to the Vyadha's karma, he was born into this family of butchers. So, for the Vyadha, what is satyam? What for him? What is natural for him? According to Ishvara's order, according to his karma, what is natural for the Vyadha is chopping up animals, in spite of the fact that it is himsa. Absolutely, he admits that. He says, yes, I know this is himsa, I'm chopping up animals. But he said, according to a broader perspective, this is satyam, this is ritam, this is according to Ishvara's order. This is so important. There's a subtle point here, let's make sure we understand. We've discussed in other contexts, let's just briefly refer to it, and that is, you've heard me mention that the morality or dharma in the Hindu tradition is not based on a list of commandments. We've had this discussion a number of times. I don't want to return, there's a whole complex teaching that goes with it. Let's not, I think you've all heard that. The story about the thief and all of this stuff. I don't want to return to that. But let's note that in the Hindu tradition, we don't have a list of commandments because we recognize the limitations of a system of ethics based on commandments. Commandments are moral absolutes. And life is too complex to have a fixed list of commandments to guide us. Given the complexity of life, do you think you could boil down morality in life to a mere list of 10 commandments? Do you think that would be sufficient? Given the complexity of life, it's ridiculous. If you wanted to have a list of commandments adequate to guide you through all the complex decision-making you need to make in life, that list would be thousands and thousands of commandments. Because it would be like, let's give an example. One of those 10 commandments found in the Old Testament of the Bible, thou shalt not kill. Now, here we go. It's like law books. Thou shalt not kill unless. Unless what? Unless you're born into a family of butchers. That would be a good example. So, and how many other cases? Unless you're a soldier engaged in warfare. Unless you are exterminating insects that threaten your crops or threaten your home. Unless, how many exceptions should we have for that rule? Thou shalt not kill, except for A, B, C, D, E, F. There'll be thousands of exceptions. Then what shall we do? Either we have a list of commandments with thousands and thousands of exceptions, or we admit that a list of commandments is not a very practical way to guide us through Dharma. Then what do we use to guide us as to Dharma? That's what he's going to discuss. And he's actually going to show, in 2 more verses, a 3-fold basis for determining what is dharma. This expression, ahimsa paramo dharma, is one of 3 guides. So he's saying that ahimsa is based on satyam, ritam, the order, Ishvara's order. And now he's going to talk further about that order, which is to say, even this statement, let me make this point clearly, even the statement, ahimsa paramo dharma, cannot be treated as a commandment. Right? Thou shalt not kill is a moral absolute. It's a commandment. In their tradition, they don't say it's okay to kill under these situations. They don't say that. They just say, that's what it says in the Bible, that's what it is, a moral absolute. Suppose we were to turn ahimsa paramo dharma into an moral absolute, which means you should never commit harm under any circumstances whatsoever. Suppose you do that. If you were to do so, if you were to turn that statement, ahimsa paramo dharma, turn it into a commandment, turn it into a moral absolute, what are the consequences? What would you eat? And he's going to talk about that. Because even if you eat vegetables, are vegetables living things? Oh. You can see, if we turn this ahimsa paramo dharma into a commandment, into a moral absolute, we create an absolutely untenable situation. It's not a moral absolute. We don't have moral absolutes. We have a principle of dharma which has to be interpreted. What is dharma is unique in every situation. You cannot generalize. You can't make a general law. Life is too complex for that. So, what we're going to see in the next series of verses is a discussion how what is dharma is not based on a commandment, ahimsa paramo dharma. What is dharma is based on Ishvara's order. What is dharma is based on satyam or ritam, this natural order of the universe, cosmic order, Puja Swamiji also called. So he's going to explain this as we go ahead. So he says in the second half, Satye kritva pratishtham tu pravartante pravrittayaha. Pravrittayaha, one's activities, pravartante, when they're carried out, satye, when they're carried out based on satya, when our activities are carried out according to Ishvara's order, then what? Kritva pratishtham. They become fruitful. One's life becomes fruitful and successful, not by following a list of commandments, not even by following ahimsa paramo dharma as a moral absolute or commandment, but how? To use Puja Swami Dayananda's language, by conforming to Ishvara's order, his very words. What does it mean to conform to Ishvara's order? That's what the rest of the chapter is about. So first of all, to know what is Ishvara's order, the Vyadha has already talked about one aspect of it. One aspect of Ishvara's order is that we're all born with karma. You cannot ignore that. Vyadha was born into this family of butchers, his karma. We are born into certain families and certain situations. That's part of Ishvara's order. We can't ignore it. We're beginning to see the complexity of life, and then the necessity. Given the complexity of life, the burden falls on us to interpret every situation very carefully. This is a subtle topic. Let me make this point before we move on to the next verse. There are 2 approaches to morality. One is, you're not gonna, I regret saying this even before I say it. Morality for dummies. Like they have these books for, this for dummies, that, nuclear physics for dummies. They have a book. So, there is such a thing as morality for dummies. What does it mean? For people who can't think very deeply. For people who are unable, by the way, there's nothing wrong with those books, right? I've seen, in fact, there's one book, I think Hinduism for Dummies, which is excellent. I've seen that book. It's well done. Really, they've done a good job. So please don't make the mistake of saying a book for dummies. If you want to learn nuclear physics, do you really want to pick up a college textbook? Are you ready for that? If you really want to learn something about nuclear physics, you better go get that book. Nuclear Physics for Dummies. The other books you won't understand. This book you'll understand. So when I say morality for dummies, I don't want you to think that's a negative judgment. It's not a negative judgment. It means a lot of people need that approach to morality. What is that approach? In that book, Morality for Dummies, what do you find? A list of commandments, a list of moral absolutes. There are a lot of people who need that list. Why? They're unable to deal with the complexity of life, all the gray zones in life. They're unable to think deeply. You know people like that. Have you ever been in a work situation and you're trying to explain something complicated to a coworker? And the coworker says, "Don't tell me all of that, just tell me what to do." You know people like that. Don't tell me all those details, just tell me what to do. There are a lot of people in life like that. Well, that comes not only in the workplace, but that comes with regard to morality and ethics as well. There are a lot of people who are not inclined to think deeply. Fine. Give them a list of commandments. They don't have to think about it. They just have to follow those commandments. That's a good thing for them. There are other people, however, which would include the vast majority of us, we're inclined to think. In fact, the argument we could make, especially about myself, we think too much. I do. But if you think a lot, or even if you think too much, very quickly you will reject this list of commandments as being too simple-minded, as being absolutely impractical for dealing with the complexity of life. Therefore, for people who are given to thinking and understanding, for people who want to understand, people who say, "Don't just tell me what to do, please help me understand why I'm supposed to do it." There are other people like that, right? Don't just tell me what I'm supposed to do, tell me why. Why should I do this? For such people, an approach to morality based on a list of commandments is horribly inadequate. For such people need to be guided by principles, not by commandments, but by principles. Ahimsa is one such principle. But now Vyadha goes even a step further. He says ahimsa is one expression of Ishvara's order. Now the challenge is to follow dharma means to conform to Ishvara's order. What does it mean to conform to Ishvara's order? The rest of this chapter explores that very complex topic. Let's see what he says. He says, Satyam heva gariyastu, Satyam heva gariyas, Shishtachara nishevitam, Shishtachara nishe, Acharascha satam dharmaha, Acharascha satam, Santaschachara lakshanaha, Santaschachara lakshanaha, Satyameva Gariyaha. He says Satyam. Satyam in the sense of Ishvara's order. Satyam in the sense of Rita, that natural order of the universe. He says Satyameva Gariyaha. This principle of Ishvara's order is Gariyaha. It is the most important thing. The most important thing is Ishvara's order, not a list of commandments. The most important thing is literally truth. So you can define Satyam as truth, but not in the sense of speaking truth. In a broader sense, an absolute truth. I think Ishvara's order is absolutely the best expression I can imagine. So Satyam, meaning Ishvara's order, is Gariyaha, the most important thing. And he says that Ishvara's order is Shishta Achara Nishevitam. Ishvara's order is meant to be Nishevita, meant to be accompanied by Shishta Achara, proper conduct. Shishta Achara Nishevitam Satyam. Ishvara's order should be accompanied by proper conduct. That's literal meaning. And it says what we just discussed, and that is our behavior should conform to Ishvara's order. But now we're still stuck. My behavior, my actions in life should conform to Ishvara's order. But what is Ishvara's order? I don't understand what is Ishvara's order. Well, maybe some other people do. I may not understand what Ishvara's order is, but he says in the second half, achara cha satam, the achara, the behavior of satam, of saintly pious people, is dharma. This is another definition of dharma. First definition of dharma he gave was ahimsa paramo dharma. Now he's quickly giving a second definition of dharma. What is the second definition of dharma? Dharma is the achara, the conduct of satam, of sants, of saintly people, of pious people. The behavior of good saintly people is a guide as to dharma. So if we are to conform to Ishvara's order, then we should have the right behavior. How to know what is the right behavior? Why don't we look at what some other people are doing? Because you look at not what everyone does, not what your next door neighbor is doing or what somebody in your workplace is doing, but you look at the behavior of saintly people and see what is their behavior. Because we know that those saintly people, their behavior will conform to Ishvara's order, and so if we emulate the behavior of those saintly people, we in that way will conform to Ishvara's order, which is dharma. Have we heard this teaching before? Maybe in the Bhagavad Gita? Maybe in chapter 3, verse 21. Yad yad acharati shreshtaha tat tadevetaro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tad anuvartate. It says, tat tad acharati shreshtaha. Shreshta, sant, the Shreshta, the greatest among us, the most saintly among us, the most wise and pious among us, yad yad acharati, whatever they do, those saintly people, sayat pramanam kurute, that becomes a guide for other people. Janaha lokaha tadanuvartate. Other people in the world can follow the behavior of those wise people. The behavior of the wise people becomes a guide. Okay, that's what is taught here. How wonderful now, we're exploring, in the absence of a list of commandments, how shall we define dharma? Well, that's what Vyadha is doing. Without a list of commandments, he says, well, you can follow ahimsa, but remember that even ahimsa is part of a bigger reality. The bigger reality is Ishvara's order, and according to Ishvara's order, sometimes you have to commit himsa. Then how to know when should I commit himsa and when should I not? When does himsa conform to Ishvara's order? And when does himsa not conform to Ishvara's order? If I'm not clear, what should I do? I should look at the behavior of wise, saintly, pious people, and I should emulate their behavior. And this is very nicely said here. It says, Achara cha satam dharma, the behavior of saintly people, that is dharma. That's a good guide as to dharma. Santaha cha achara lakshanaha. He says, these santaha, these saintly people, are the lakshanas. They define achara. They define what is good conduct. They define, these pious, saintly people define what it is to conform to Ishvara's order. Now, it's still more complicated. Very complicated, because how do you know who is the wise person to be followed and who is not to be followed? And there are certain people who everyone says, oh, how wise. And then you find out that they're doing something wrong. That happens. Then what should we do? Well, what we should do is not be rigidly committed to any one narrow little thing that defines dharma. And that's what he's going to conclude in the very next verse. He says, you cannot say dharma is this one thing. In the next verse, he's going to say there are at least 3 different ways you can define dharma, 3 different bases for dharma. What are those? Vedokta paramo dharma, Vedokta paramo dharma, Dharma shastreshu cha paraha, Dharma shastreshu cha, Shishta chirnascha shishtanam, Shishta chirnascha shish, Trividham dharma lakshanam, Trividham, threefold, is dharma lakshanam, is the definition of dharma. And none of the 3 are a list of commandments. 3 different ways of approaching dharma, none of which are following a list of moral absolutes. What are they? He says one is Vedoktaha, what the Vedas teach. What is taught in the Vedas. What is taught in the Vedas? Paramadharmaha. The main principle of dharma being ahimsa. The word ahimsa is left out, it's implied. So the principle of ahimsa, taught by the Vedas, he says is one way of defining dharma, not the only way, because he observes on dharma shastreshu cha aparaha. There are other definition of dharma, which is found where? Dharma shastreshu, plural. In other scriptures about dharma, he uses it in plural, suggesting that there are a large number of other scriptures that describe how to conform to Ishvara's order. He says you can follow the Vedas, option 1. Option 2, you can follow other scriptures. And option 3, shishta achirnaha cha shishtanam. The good conduct of saintly people is the 3rd option. So what is he saying in his verse? 3 different ways of being guided to follow dharma, being guided to conform to Ishvara's order. 1 is Vedic scriptures. 2 is other scriptures. And 3rd is the behavior of good saintly people, the guidance of gurus, the guidance of wise people. Now it's interesting that he gives 3 different criteria, because you can imagine that one scripture will say one thing Another scripture will say another thing, and a wise person will do a third thing. It happens. This is the complexity of life. Following Dharma is the most complicated, in my opinion. I'll give you my opinion. Following Dharma is the most complicated thing, far more difficult than gaining Brahma Vidya. That's my opinion. I think Brahma Vidya is easy compared to following Dharma, compared to conforming to Ishvara's order. Life is complex. If life is so complex, what can we do? Well, first thing we can do is admit life is complex. Recognize it for what it is, and then do the best we can. What does it mean to do the best we can? He gave 3 different sources of guidance. Should we use one of them? Should we use 2 of them? Or should we use all 3 of these sources of guidance? We should use all 3. So we should take the advice of the Vedic sages. We should consult other scriptures, and we should consult other teachers and wise persons and saintly people. We should make use of all the resources possible and do the best we can, given the fact that we live in a really, really complex world in which finding what is Dharma is not simple. This is a recognition of the reality of the complexity of Dharma. A final comment. I think the whole of the Mahabharata represents that complexity. Just for a moment, compare the story of Ramayana to the story of Mahabharata. The Ramayana has a fairly simple, straightforward story, right? It has a villain, Ravana, who kidnaps the heroine, Sita, who is later saved by the hero. What a stereotypical story, Rama. But in the Mahabharata, it's so complex. Is Bhishma the hero of the story, or the one who caused all the problems? And the answer is both. He is the most wise, revered character in the entire text, Bhishma. He's also the one who caused all of the problems. Absolutely caused all of the problems. This represents the complexity of life. The Mahabharata presents characters of such tremendous complexity. Drona is another incredibly complex character. You could spend hours and hours just analyzing the complexity of a character like Drona or Bhishma. And what will you conclude? Are they good guys or bad guys, to use the American English? And you have to say neither and both. And that represents the complexity of life. Given this complexity of life, we try to navigate our way the best we can. What is Dharma? What is Adharma? And here in this verse, by the way, this verse is the last verse of this chapter. Next verse is a beginning of a new chapter. So the current chapter ends with this observation of the Vyadha. And to paraphrase, he says, in this very complex life, to figure out what it is to conform to Ishvara's order, you better take advantage of all the guidance you can get. Take the guidance of the Vedic scriptures, take the guidance of other scriptures as well, and take the guidance of the wise ones and the saints, and hopefully with all of this advice and guidance we can do the best we can and conform to Ishvara's order. Now, next chapter begins. Next chapter, we're going to get some really interesting. This is a delightful chapter. We'll just let the chapter begin, and you'll see why it is so interesting. So the Vyadha continues, teaching this Brahmana Kaushika. He says, Yaraham hyachare karma, Yaraham hyachare Ghoram hetarasam shayam, ghoram hetarasam. Vidhis tu balavan brahman, vidhis tu balavan. Dustaram hi parakritam, duskram. So he's explaining his conduct, chopping up animals, and he says, aham achare karma. He says, this work, yet, that work which I am doing, aham I, he indeed, achare karma, the work which I am doing, etat, this work that I am doing, is ghoram, asamshayam. Asamshayam, without doubt, it is ghora. Ghora means frightening. In this context, disgusting. He admits it. The work I am doing is horrible. To chop up, can you imagine doing that all day long, every day? This fellow is chopping up animals into little bits. This is ghoram. He says, asamshayam. Absolutely, certainly, it is disgusting, it is terrible. Vidhihi tu, but Brahman, O Brahmana, O Kaushika, he addresses a Brahmana. He says, but vidhi balavan. We saw that word vidhi before. That word vidhi was one of many synonyms for adrishta karma phala. We gave a whole list of synonyms in a prior chapter. We said vidhi, I wrote them down, vidhi, adrishta, bhagya, niyati, dishta. Remember that discussion long ago? These are all synonyms for prarabdha karma. So he says, vidhi balavan. One's prarabdha karma is very powerful, balavan. Dustaram is very difficult to avoid, purakritam. The results of your past actions, purakritam, the results of your past actions, which is vidhi, prarabdha karma, it is balavan, it is very powerful, it is dustaram, it is very hard to come out of. He's born into a family of butchers. What can he do? Now, shall we go back to that child born, that Palestinian child born? His father was a terrorist. His brother was a terrorist. They're both dead. His other brother is a terrorist. So he's born into a family of terrorists. And you might think, well, what is his prarabdha karma? Based on that, you would say it's his prarabdha karma to be another terrorist and to fight against the Israelis. But the word here, balavan, means very strong. Dustaram means difficult to conquer. Balavan does not mean, balavan means very strong. It does not mean omnipotent. It does not mean all-powerful. Dustaram means that which is crossed with difficulty doesn't mean it's impossible to cross. So, coming back to this boy born in this Palestinian family of terrorists, the boy's karma is indeed balavan. It's very strong. It is indeed dustaram, difficult to come out of. Is it impossible to come out of? No. And we recognize this all the time, and that is, being born into a certain family or certain condition is highly, use different words, it molds your life to a great extent, but not completely. Over the years, I've heard from some of you. You told me, Swamiji, I was born in a little village. We didn't even have electricity. And now I'm an engineer or I'm a doctor and I'm doing all of this. Look at that. If your birth into that village life, if that was balavan, that was very powerful karma. It is dustaram, difficult to come out of it, but you did, you can, and many do. This is what we understand about karma. Karma is balavan. Prarabdha karma is powerful. Prarabdha karma is dustaram. But you still have free will. Remember that discussion? No matter how strong your karma is, it doesn't negate your free will. And the simplest way to explain it is this. The karma that you were born with is so powerful, it led you to this moment now. That's the power of the karma of your life. It led you to this situation, this moment. On the other hand, in this moment, do you have free will? You have free will. With your free will, you can even go contrary to a lifetime of karma. A lifetime of karma may take you, in the case of this boy, a lifetime of karma may have taken them down that path of terrorism. He still has free will. We all have free will. No amount of karma, prarabdha karma, can deprive you of free will. We always have the free will to act in the present moment. So he says, the Vyadha says, my karma, being born into his family, is very powerful, it is very strong. He continues to explain, Svadharma iti kritva tu, Svadharma iti kritva, natyajami dvijotama, natyajami dvijot. Pura kritamiti jnatva, pura kritamiti jnatva, jivam yetena karmana, jivam yetena. Swadharma iti kritva tu. The Vyadha says, I have understood, kritva, having done means having understood what? This is my swadharma. What is my swadharma? Chopping up animals. Having understand that this work of being a butcher is my swadharma, my duty, not tyajami. Therefore, I will not abandon doing my duty. Dvajotama, O great twice born, O great Brahmana, he addresses Kaushika. Pura kritam iti jnatva. Understand that being born into this family of butchers is purakritam, the result of actions that I did in my past life. Understanding this, jivami etena karmana, I support myself and my family with this action, with this work. Now, what is the difference between that boy born in a Palestinian family and this fellow, this butcher? The butcher knows that by conforming to his dharma, he's supporting his family. By conforming to the karmas with which he was born, he supports his family. Supporting his family is a good outcome. Suppose the Palestinian boy were to make the same argument. By conforming to my family's tradition of terrorism, what good will come out of that? The boy will die. He may take a few other people with him. There's only a negative outcome. Here again, we're brought right back to the complexity of life, are we not? So can you say, I'm born into this situation, therefore I should accept it? Can you make that into a general rule? You can't even make that into a general rule. It's true for the Vyadha. He was born into the family of butchers. Therefore, being a butcher is his swadharma, but we cannot generalize that into a rule. Whatever family you're born into, you should conform to that. If that were true, those of you who are raised in little towns or villages, you should stay there. What are you doing here? So look at this. You took, those of you who came from a little town or village, you used your free will to go contrary to your prarabdha karma, correct? Remember our example of the river? And we said, if you're a strong swimmer, you can go against that current. There's no rule. Sometimes the current of karma is very strong, as it was in the case of the Vyadha. Sometimes the current of karma is not very strong. And with your free will, you can actually counteract that. You can't make it into a simple rule. One more verse. Swakarma tyajato brahman swakarma tyajato adharma hiha drishyate adharma hiha swakarma nirato yastu swakarma nirato sadharma hiti nishchayaha sadharma hiti nishchayaha. In a prior verse he says, I will not abandon my responsibility, my swakarma or swadharma. So he says here, continuing on that point, swakarma, one's own karma, also dharma, one's own responsibilities, tyajataha, one who abandons. For one who abandons his responsibilities, brahman, O brahmana, adharma iti drishyate. Drishyate, abandoning your dharma, is seen, abandoning your responsibilities is seen as being a dharma, is it not? So, for the, how complex, for the Vyadha to abandon his butcher work is adharma. For the Palestinian boy to abandon terrorism is dharma. We really have to keep our eyes open. We really have to think about this. So karma nirataha yahatu. But one who is swakarma nirataha, one who is committed to his own karma, to his own duties, to his responsibilities, sahadharmaha iti nishchayaha. This can be ascertained as really following dharma. This is so complex, let me just end the class illustrated with an anecdote about the complexity of dharma and determining what is dharma. During the Vietnam War, I was one of those protesters. That was my culture. So I was protesting the Vietnam War. I thought it was an immoral war. Now, the question is, was I protesting I could have been protesting for one of two reasons. I could have been protesting the war in Vietnam because it was immoral. I could have been protesting the war in Vietnam because I didn't want to get drafted and killed, as some of my friends were. So notice, either or both of those motivations could have been in me. In reality, they were both there. I considered the war immoral, but I also had a very selfish motive. I didn't want to get drafted and shot. So, this is in late 60s, early 70s. So in the mid-1970s, I graduate from college, and I have a choice of places of employment. One of them is very interesting. One place of employment, they wanted to give me a job working to support the atomic weapons in this country. It was a job to help track and control our nuclear arsenal. I said, I'm not going to take that job. It was just too disgusting. Then I had two other options. The option I chose I chose to go for a aerospace company in California that made the guidance and control systems for military aircraft and missiles. What's wrong with this picture? Now, a few years before, I was protesting that immoral war and protesting all of the armaments that were used to kill innocent Vietnamese villagers, which was a fact. But here I am, just a few years later, graduating from school, taking a job which had a very definite military connection. What happened? I sold out. I admit, I have no choice but to admit, that is to say that my sense of Dharma was not very well thought out. It was not very clear. If I was so clear about the immorality of war and weapons, I should not have taken that job. I did. How did I justify it? I came up with some excuse. I don't know. I don't even remember what the excuses were. But I made an excuse and took that job. Why? I wanted that job. For selfish reasons. Now, I'm just sharing this anecdote just to show the challenge and complexity of determining in our lives what is Dharma. If only there were a simple answer to the question. There is no simple answer to the question. Then what can we do? First thing we can do is don't assume there's a simple answer. Recognize the complexity of life and then seek guidance and support wherever we can. Something I didn't do. Of course, I was, a 20-something who didn't. Interesting, 20-somethings, not you. When I was 20-something, I thought I knew everything when I knew nothing. To me, that's the definition of a 20-something. A 20-something thinks they know everything when in fact they know nothing. That may or may not be true of other 20-somethings. It was absolutely true of me. But the fact is that to determine what is Dharma requires us to think very deeply and to take guidance. The prior verse said we can take guidance from Vedic scriptures, from other scriptures, and also to take guidance from wise people, from the conduct of saintly people. We need all of that advice and guidance because life is just too complicated. Okay, a couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow we have satsang on Sundays. We'll have delightful weather tomorrow, so we'll meet outside in the garden at 6:15. Question answer period. It'll be very pleasant. Come and join us. Also, I want to mention very briefly that if you shop on Amazon.com, Amazon has a program where they will donate 0.5% of your purchase. They'll donate to Arsha Bodha Center. You have to log on with a special code. Go to our website. On the home page of our website, you can log in there to Amazon, and thereafter you can always log in the same way, and 0.5% of your purchases will go to as a donation to the ashram. The library will be open after class. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.